Woman, an in-depth exploration of the world of women today with Sandra Elkin.
Good evening and welcome to Woman. Tonight's program is the first of 3 programs we will be devoting to motherhood. Now, motherhood is a very traditional topic, but recently many people have begun to write and think about it in a very untraditional way, more openly and honestly. My guests this evening are 2 such people. They are Angela Barren McBride, a psychiatric nurse working on a doctorate in developmental psychology, and author of a book titled The Growth and Development of Mothers. And also Shirley Radl. Shirley is a founder of a Parental Stress Hot Line to help troubled parents and prevent child abuse. She is also the author of a book titled Mother's Day is Over. Welcome to both of you. Angela, why do you think women have babies?
I think they have babies for all sorts of reasons that they don't like to admit to themselves. I think they're the reasons that they admit out loud, and the reasons that never quite get admitted out loud. I think some of the reasons that you admit out loud is that somehow your time has come. I mean, after a while, when your friends start recommending fertility doctors, and you've been married for 2 or 3 years, and your father hints, and your mother hints about becoming grandparents, I mean, these are all reasons on a more conscious level, I think, why you have children, to please your parents, to prove that you're a woman, to prove that you can do it. All your friends are doing it, so that you can gripe when you go to somebody's house about the high cost of cereal for your child, kind of thing. I think there's some sense in which it's a little bit like gambling too. You want to see what his genes and your genes together will look like. I think there are all sorts of reasons, though, that you don't admit. I mean, some people may not even admit those reasons. Dr. Spock, at one point in his baby child book, talks about people having babies because they love children, and I would think probably that is one of the reasons why you don't have babies. I'm afraid I take issue with him there, because I think most of us don't even have that much contact with children, especially as our own families are getting smaller. We may be in love with the idea of being in love with children. We may have all sorts of ideas about how lovely it'll be. I know I had all sorts of dreams about, I've always been overweight, and I had visions of suddenly being more athletic than I'd ever been. You know, I would go to the seashore and go swimming with my child, and somehow I'd be more one with nature with a child than I had been before. Again, I think other reasons that you don't admit out loud that say pertain to my own experience has to do, you know, I was in a job that I didn't like all that much, and it was sort of time that I should start having a child, and getting pregnant was one way of distancing myself from job pressures.
Shirley, you were a mother later.
Yes. We were married for about 8 years when Lisa was finally born, and I had always wanted children. Quote, wanted, I think for so many reasons that Angela touched on. I've been nodding, and you know, it's so much of it. I had a vision of what I would be as a person. Mm-hmm. With children. Somehow this
a better person.
Oh, much. Mm-hmm. Yes, better looking too. Yes, and capable and remarkable and all of these things. And it also never occurred to me that I never questioned it. I never said, do I want to have children? Of course I wanted to have children. All married women want to have children. And of course all unmarried women want to get married and have children. It's just ingrained. And in addition to being very programmed and having a lot of really foolish ideas about what parenthood was all about, I had a lot of social pressure because of the 8 years. You want to hear about the recommendations for fertility drugs and doctors. I can write chapter and verse on that. I couldn't get past conversations with people when they would say, do you have children? And I would say no. The next question was, when are you going to start your family? And if I said I don't know, they would say, don't you like children? Oh, yes, my husband and I have been trying. And I was recommended to the world's greatest gynecologists, and someone even gave me some literature and said I could talk to them anytime about adoption.
You know, the other thing that happens, besides wondering if you're barren, people start wondering whether, in fact, you're not too selfish to have children, you know.
Oh, always,
And people
yes.
sort of, you know, talk about when you'll settle down. I always found it sounded
Settle
like
down.
death. I mean, you know, I can remember being pregnant and my mother saying to me, well, maybe now you'll stop flitting around, you'll settle down. I thought, never, never. You know, I'll have a child, but I'll never settle
Yes.
down. Because, in fact, in some ways, I thought, I saw that as sort of my death warrant, you know, if I did settle
down. Yes.
I think a lot of the feelings, though, that you don't admit out loud or you barely are in touch with really do affect how you operate, though, as a parent when you do become one.
I think so, too.
I mean, I think you have to sort of get in touch. At least I found that the more you realize all the crazy reasons why you decided to have a child that you didn't admit to yourself, you know, especially now with contraceptives being readily available, there's so much decision making now that's part of it. And you like to think that you've been very rational. I mean, you decided
Yes.
what was the propitious time. And there is something
Yes.
about that makes you, I think, even more wary of looking at some of the crazy feelings, which I think are always going to be with us. And it's only when you look at some of these, what I'd rather like to call normal crazy feelings that everybody
Yes.
has, but everybody thinks are crazy, that in fact you can come to terms with the reality of being a parent.
Before we talk about the reality, though, I'd like to talk about what you both call the myth of motherhood.
I would like to say one thing as
Okay.
a footnote to what she said. You know, the same pressure that pressures you into having the babies is the same pressure that pressures you into trying to duplicate a very plastic, perfect model of what parenthood is. It's coming from the same source, and it's the same thing. And when you have your children as a result of social pressure, you're already caught in that crack, and you continue after they're born.
What about the myths now?
Okay, I would say that the myths, myth number one, I guess, is that children enhance a marriage.
And even can save it.
Oh, it can, oh, definitely can save it, yes. Yes, I'm certainly glad you mentioned that. And that having children can fulfill you, and fulfill you as a woman.
All right, now, you're saying that they're myths. You both say this, in effect, in both of your books.
Yes.
But you have to tell me why they're myths.
Can I elaborate a little bit more
Yes.
on
Yes,
the
do.
mystique?
Yeah.
I'd sort of like to quote, without naming anybody, some of the kinds of, in my own sort of professional background as a psychiatric nurse, I've had occasion to read a lot of the psychiatric theory. And in it, you find phrases like motherhood is the ultimate fulfillment. It is the climax of one's erotic gratification. You find very distinguished theorists talking about how by becoming a mother you diffuse your own aggressiveness and you help diffuse your husband's. Now, the notion that somehow being a mother will make you less aggressive, will help you be more calm with your husband, is the climax of your erotic gratification and ultimate fulfillment. If that isn't mystical, language number one, and also, I mean, slogans like that, and they are slogans,
Yes.
sort of make you have ideas that well, reality doesn't allow, but you buy them. I mean, there's a very real sense in which I sort of thought that being a mother would be the ultimate fulfillment, and in many ways, you're disappointed, and then you wonder if it's not you, because
Of course.
you read somebody very distinguished saying it is the ultimate fulfillment, and you find that you don't think this is the ultimate. I mean, I think
Yes, yes.
It's
and
something
we
you grow
tend
into.
to believe
Well, what you're
these
saying is that there's
experts.
nothing wrong with it not being the ultimate.
That's right, but we as mothers had to learn that ourselves, rather painfully, because we expected parenthood to give us so much and to turn us into so much, and when it didn't happen, obviously, it had to be something wrong with us.
well, a lot of the literature I like to think of as what men really hope women can do, that they know they couldn't do themselves. They couldn't be fulfilled by being a parent, but they'd like to think that women, it sort of comes under the heading of convenient social virtue, or that motherhood would be, it's a painful experience, or a lot of people find it painful. Certainly childbirth, I mean, it can be distorted to be seen as too painful, but there is discomfort at the very least, and pain connected with it. So there's something about calling it the ultimate, an erotic gratification that somehow sidesteps the fact that it can be a painful experience, not only when you're actually delivering the child, but when you on a day-to-day basis are trying to function in the role of mother.
Yes.
And I think a lot of the sort of wishful, a lot of the motherhood mystique is sort of wishful thinking on the part of male theorists, projecting onto the woman what they really hope that she can do and would like to think that their mothers would do for them.
There's some good examples in your book. One is you were referring to Sylvia Plath and discussing the description of her suicide in another book that you had read. Would you go into that just a little bit?
Well, I remember reading about her, there was a book on suicide where they talked about her, and it was written by somebody who had known her. And one of the things that they talk about is how she, towards the end, was getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning and writing poetry, and then at the same time taking care of her children all day long. And I was impressed with how the person writing it wanted to convey the idea she may have been a crazy lady, but boy, was she a good mother. She continued, even though she was more and more getting depressed, to function during the day, even though she was writing poetry at 4 o'clock in the morning, in terms of taking care of her children. And in fact, they talk about just before she put her head into the gas oven, that she put bread and milk out in the children's room so when they would wake up, there'd be something for them to eat. And I see this as sort of the ultimate gesture that she made toward some crazy notion of the good mother. And yet the author, in talking about this, talked about in terms of, even though she was so depressed, look at what a good mother she was.
Yeah, didn't he also say that her reasons were because she wanted to rejoin her dead father and the London cold? She was living in London at the time, and they were having a very severe winter, and mentioned nothing about the fact that she'd had a miscarriage.
Yeah, in 2 years she had 2 children, a miscarriage, an appendectomy, and her husband, she was separated from her husband. And a lot of that, which I think is real trauma. I mean, you don't have to be very Freudian or very psychoanalytic to say she had a lot of crises, and still was keeping up. I mean, there was clearly a real conflict between her wanting to produce poetry and to sort of do something that expressed herself, and having 2 small children she had to take care of. And there's a complete dismissal in the book of the fact that the day-to-day kind of wearing down of just taking care of children without any help, that this could have been, in fact, a causative factor. I mean, I'd sooner think that wore her down and made her depressed and made her commit suicide than somehow wanting to be reunited with your dead father kind of thing.
Before we get too far into the program, I want you both to make it clear where you stand. I mean, I think, I'm afraid people will get the impression that you're both knocking motherhood terribly. And I know you're not doing that you're making an attempt to be more realistic.
Yeah, I think that both of us, in similar and yet different ways, are trying to put motherhood in perspective. What we are knocking is not motherhood or children, but the role of motherhood. The way it's evolved, the way it is today, it's an impossible role. It's one that guarantees that a woman is going to fail. It's also one that precludes any suggestion that a father is equally responsible for the children in the care and the nurturing. And I think that it's such a terribly phony role. No one can achieve it. And yet I think we keep trying. And I would have to say the experts have done this, the mass media, the women's magazines have done this by and large with their advertisements and their stories. And they run stories about how children have saved marriages. They run stories about remarkable mothers and put them up as models for us to follow. And we find ourselves doing a lot of, I would say, garbage work and garbage worrying, and we've lost sight of our priorities. And I think that both Angela and I would like to see us get to the point where we could look at parenthood and say what it is and what some of the options are, and reorder the priorities where they make sense, where the giving a child love and nurturing and good feelings is more important than knocking yourself out trying to be a perfect mother to such an extent that you have nothing left over to give him except to tell him to shut up and quit bothering you while you're baking his cookies or whatever it is.
I know a lot of my own stand can be sort of deduced from the title of my book. It's called The Growth and Development of Mothers. And by that, I wanted to do a takeoff in the title of all those books that talk about the growth and development of children. And there are enormous amounts of books on what the mother, especially, parents generally, but mother in particular, should do for their children. And the assumption made in most of the literature is that mother is a grown-up. She's had her day of being taken care of, and now is the time for her to take care of her children. And I really do think becoming a parent is a developmental crisis. That is, there are issues that you have to come to terms with in being a parent. Your needs, your aggressive feelings, any thoughts that you have before you were a parent are the same as the ones you're going to have. It doesn't transform you. There's nothing magic that happens. And it's a real mistake to sort of see mother as grown up rather than a person in the process of growing up.
Okay, what does this do to a mother?
What does what do?
What does this do to a mother, assuming that she's grown the minute she has a child? I mean, we're all assumed to be mature at that moment, right?
Well, I think what it does is that kind of view that she's already grown up doesn't allow her to say what her needs are. It doesn't allow her to say, there are times when I feel like blowing my stack. I mean, if you read some of the literature, they talk about when your child throws a temper tantrum, the best thing to do is to be, there, not to sort of ignore it, and be calm, because if you're calm and don't participate, it'll go away. I mean, what people fail to say is that you probably have not gotten over all your own aggressive feelings. That, one of my first responses to my child throwing a temper tantrum was to have one of my own. And in fact, I found that one of the things that I need, then look at it, I say, well, I'm not much better than she is. And over time, and it was only over time, where I really deliberately tried to take care of my feelings and to show her a better way of handling her feelings. And that, in fact, I sort of grew up and she grew up. And the model was not, mommy is so good, mommy isn't going to get angry, and expecting her also to be so good and not get angry. When in fact, that's a crazy view of people. I mean, I prefer to think that, like, if you're angry, if you get really angry, it can't be an irresponsible angry. You can still get angry, but the important thing is to let somebody know why you blew your stack at a particular time.
Yes.
And in fact, instead of being always good as a mother, I have found that it really was important for me not blow my stack, but to say, no, when you did this and you did this and you did this, mommy didn't get angry, but boy, when you did that. And the spilling of the milk was a small thing, but do you realize when you did all those other things, and I tried so hard not to get angry with you, when you did that, you know how it is at the end of the day, I got so mad. And I must say, this may not work for everybody, but I found that in my own experience that if you did do this, children say the same thing back to you. They say, mommy, boy, am I angry with you, and let me tell you why.
Yes, and I think, too, what you're bringing out is that children need to know that their parents have feelings. And again, the experts and, all of the pundits on child care don't seem to allow for this. There seems to be a suggestion that since you are grown up, you don't have these feelings. But if you should have these feelings, your child shouldn't know, because your child will feel insecure.
Well, they usually, so many books have a chapter at the beginning saying parents have feelings too, and it usually is about 3 pages long.
Yes.
And you get the impression that they think the feelings last as long as it takes for you to read that 3-page chapter.
Yes.
And it was an aberration, you may be angry, but it goes away soon, and then you're back to being normal.
Yes.
And the normal is, in fact, being in the process of growing up. And I think, in many ways, if you show your struggles to your child, I mean, that is much more of a real picture of what life's about than to sort of
That's part
be
of the giving
plastic
to your
Madonna
child
kind of thing.
Well, there's one thing we all seem to have in common, is that we all believe everyone else is doing a better job as a mother than we are.
Indeed, we do. We see our neighbors as as one who just stepped out of the pages of the Ladies' Home Journal. And you don't think about all of the things you do, but you'll see someone doing something, you'll say, oh, gee, I haven't enrolled Lisa in dancing class, and I probably should because it's a confidence builder, mostly because somebody else is doing it and doing 6 other things. And you really do believe it, but I've had the opportunity to really hear mothers and really listen to them. And I find that so many of the women that look like they're doing it perfectly, and this is not to say there aren't those who do and aren't happy at it, but so many of the mothers that look so great are having the same sorts of conflicts, and they don't have any place to take those conflicts. Now they have me in my community, but it's, you know, we all look at each other and think everybody else is
It's a
doing
very competitive
so great.
society. We're all
Yes.
really keen, you know, there is, in a competitive society like ours, we're all sort of gung-ho creating perfect products. And if you read the child care literature, the traditional role for the woman is to create the superior product. That is, your child should both be intelligent and yet emotionally not retarded. Your child should be both obedient and yet expressive. Your child should be assertive and at the same time not get into fights. And those, a lot of the virtues that we even try to sort of put forth in our kids are my child doesn't like kids, children. My daughter's always telling me that those are goats instead of, but a lot of those values that in fact mothers are supposed to nurture in the child seem to be at odds with each other
They
to
are
begin
at odds
with.
with each other.
And we're so eager for our child to be, I mean, and especially in the traditional role, if you do define yourself in terms of strictly child care, homemaking kind of thing, the way that you do look for success is for your child to be successful. And I think that in itself puts on pressures, and the more, and you know, I think we're a very well-read public, so that we read an awful lot of the literature and take in more and more expectations for what we should be, and only half hear when people say, you know, it isn't really like that.
What effect is this having on all of us then?
Well, I think that for one thing, we have to start looking at what it might be doing to the children. I have a feeling that our so-called child-centered culture is causing us to rear large groups of neglected children, emotionally neglected children. I think that mothers are having more difficulty really nurturing. You know, I keep saying to people, what does the carpool for the Little League have to do with your so-called natural role? Really, think about all of the things that have been added to the maternal role besides giving birth and nursing and nurturing. There's a very long list, and good mothers do all of these things, and good mothers follow all of the advice, conflicting, I might add, of the experts. And I think we're confused, and I think that we're really not able to be the kinds of mothers that, well, would foster healthy, happy children.
I think you have frustrated mothers. I think you have pushy mothers. You have the sort of Portnoy's complaint kind of thing, you know, Sophie Portnoy kind of thing. Always the, you know, the stereotype of the mother who's always there with chicken soup and always doesn't allow you any independence. But the society created her, and the society at the same time is creating. I mean, that kind of thing is destructive, I think, to women, in that it makes them, in fact, not allow themselves to be persons, kind of thing. But at the same time, I think it's bad for children, because the notion that somehow you will do for your child presuppose that at some point the child will then become independent. I don't think children automatically become independent if you, in fact, keep doing for your child, keep being self-effacing. I think the more in a family you negotiate needs and realize that everybody has needs and negotiate them in an atmosphere of goodwill, I mean, that makes more mental health sense to me anyway.
All right, well, we're being told by the women's movement certain things, and we're being told by, you know, Dr. Spock one thing and a lot of people in between. How is anybody to know what to do? I mean, I mean, as you describe it, you really are saying that it's impossible to function as a mother the way we have defined it.
I think we can start, and I suppose here are two more people saying, making some suggestions, but I think we can start by clearing away some of the garbage that's associated with the myth.
Do you mean values? Wrong values?
Yes, incorrect values or invalid values, if you will. And I think, too, that we can approach parenthood for reasons that are not to save a marriage or to please an in-law or to please a parent. I think we can approach it by wanting to have a child, but I think that we really ought to know what's involved. And I think both of us have tried to provide a pretty good job description of what's involved. Angela certainly hit at the need for women to grow, that they weren't just automatically grown up, and that you have to prepare to prepare. Besides preparing for the realities of the task, the care of the child, and these things, and the responsibility, and how it feels to have this, really enormous responsibility, you have to prepare to do a lot of growing.
We have 1 minute left. I know that you both disagree on certain levels with some things that are coming out of the women's movement on this subject. Why don't you talk about that in the time we have left?
I know the biggest thing that I have, if you will, I hate the women's movement, it's so amorphous, but is that in many ways, if you do the traditional thing, that is, become a mother, there's some suggestion that you've copped out, that in fact you must be conservative if you've done the traditional thing. And I think we should not look just at I think we should look at the old lifestyle, the old role of motherhood, and look at women's needs. I think that the women's movement's done that for us. Look at her needs, kind of thing.
Thank you both. Thank you, Shirley Radl, author of Mother's Day is Over, and Angela McBride, author of The Growth and Development of Mothers. Thank you for coming. See you next week.
Production funding provided by public television stations, the Ford Foundation, and the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.